H&T Design Media. My name is Beverly Reynolds, and in this particular video, we're going to talk about how you can make the transition from being a classroom instructor to e-learning. Stay tuned, guys. Hey there, guys, and welcome back. As I promised you in the intro, we're going to talk today about making the transition between classroom training and e-learning. So here goes. But before I do, I want to really use this time to tell you about a situation from my life that will really help illustrate how I personally made that transition. A lot of people think, well, if you're a trainer in one situation, you can be a trainer in another. But I think you're going to find through my story that it's a little bit more complicated than that, but something that anybody can do given the right mindset. So with that, here goes. Back in about 1998, one of my first jobs out of college, I was a computer applications instructor for a little computer learning center. That meant that I taught about 20 different classes from beginner to intermediate to advanced level. It also meant that not only did I get a lot of software introduction and a lot of immersion into various software packages, but the learning center that I was a part of did not ever, for any reason, of course barring a national disaster or a natural disaster of some type, they did not cancel classes. So, one class I remember I was supposed to teach Publisher, and I was their graphic design girl, if you will. But I was thrown into a Publisher class and I'd never even opened the software. But they basically walked me into my classroom and said, okay, here it is. These are your students for the rest of the day. And I'd never even looked at the software. You can about imagine how sweaty my palms were. My hands were literally shaking. My voice was equally as shaky, if you will. And to say the least, I was very nervous. But it also taught me a valuable lesson to believe in me. To believe that I had whatever it was in me to not only frantically look at the back of the room as I gave the students a lab, I had about 20 minutes to then study what I would teach for the next hour or so. All from the back of the room by paging through this simple book. I was scared. Ironically, I ended up with a freelance assignment out of that class because somebody was fooled. But there was the beginning of my instructional training, only this was classroom-based training. I did that for a couple of years, and then around 2000, I worked in the energy industry. I also, within that same time frame, worked in the hospitality industry. So I got a lot of different industries kind of thrown at me all at once. My actual instructional design from an e-learning standpoint truly began in the hospitality industry. I was working for a hotel chain at the corporate office. Now, if I recall back to that time frame, I started off in a test lab. They sent me to work in this little room with a couple of other testers. I'd never been a tester either, but I was testing software. Because of my experience that I had as a classroom trainer, I was able to make the jump and be able to sit in a cube, test the software, and see things from the user's perspective. That then turned into a full-time job as an instructional designer. I was able to write code for the developer, and that caught the developer's eye because it saved him time, but I also caught a local resource, and that in fact it was the distance learning manager. I caught her eye because she noticed that I was not only testing the software, but I was writing the code to fix the issues as well. And so her thought was, well, if you can put things into a systematic approach and you can tell the developer how to recreate the issue, you can train a user how to use really any aspect of the software. But there was one problem. I didn't believe in myself, and I'd never been an instructional designer. But somebody else believed in me. So I thought, well, why not try to believe in me? So my biggest advice to you guys is to believe in you. Whether somebody believes in you or not, you believe in you. You will go in unimaginable places. So continuing on with my story, I recall I did about 2.5 years in the hospitality industry, and I helped housekeepers learn how to use the software so that they could mark their rooms as complete or not complete with reasons and so forth. We also created role-based training for managers that they could monitor the activities of all of their housekeepers. And that is how I began doing role-based training and creating e-learning, something that somebody that I would never ever meet was able to take and learn from my experience, my knowledge. If you think about the classroom training that I had at the Computer Learning Center there, I was able to gauge the involvement or the engagement of my users by seeing their faces, by looking them in the whites of the eyes. I could see and monitor their reactions. However, when it comes to e-learning, you can't necessarily do that. You can have great assessment questions, you can ask them survey questions. The biggest thing that I would encourage you to do as an e-learning consultant or employee is to engage with your users. Force that engagement, but you've got to initiate their feedback. So it's a little bit different than a classroom. Somebody might raise their hand and you know that they are listening to the content. In e-learning, it's a little bit harder. Now you can monitor metrics, you can monitor completion rates, you can monitor assessment successes and percentages, but you may never meet many, if not all, of your students face to face. So you've got to have a little bit different mind frame. You've got to be able to know that you are solving the problem regardless of where your users are located. Sometimes it's easy to get in a rut when everybody's in front of you. You look at them, you ask them a question, and they respond. You can't do that in e-learning. You create training that you don't really know the impacts. Sometimes you can gauge whether they've learned the software by whether or not they can carry out their responsibilities, especially if it's job-based training. Regardless of the subject, it is your responsibility to take that problem that's to be solved and then put yourself in those shoes. Pretend like you are the user. What is it that you would need to gain out of that training in order to solve that problem? Now, as I mentioned before, you can do so in many different ways. You can look at how many people are completing your course. You can see how many people have taken a particular module. You can see the pathway, depending upon your LMS, that the students have navigated. And by LMS, by the way, I mean Learning Management System, something that tracks the training progress of all of your learners. So there's a lot of different opportunities to really become engaged with your users. You could ask them for their email address and you could send them a survey. SurveyMonkey is great for that kind of thing. There's a lot of different options out there. But all in all, I would encourage you guys that no matter what type of training you're doing, that you always have the right mind frame, a can-do attitude. Then be willing to learn new things. Doing e-learning may require learning new software packages, but you've got to have that open mind to say, you know what? I am going to be the one to solve your problem. And then you've got to engage with those users. You've got to keep them engaged. You've got to keep them wanting more. Just like this video. Of course, I hope that you've learned a lot from this video, and I want to keep you coming back to our channel and help you and keep you wanting to learn more from our channel. So with that, be sure to like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it around to all your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make today great, guys.